Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hard-working Americans and their families?
You will! This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefits in your benefit plan. Now prepare to learn,
Plan,
save,
and protect with the FIA Group.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another FIA Group Empowering Plans podcast. It's been years and years of saying that, Corey, but it still gets me every time. I wish my name had more P's in it, because it just comes right off the lips. And, speaking of just those things that you wish there was always more of, I've got with me today Corey Crigger. Corey, I was thinking about it, and I think that the last 3 or 4 podcasts that I've done, I did with you. And now I'm starting to think, is this intentional? Do they have it scheduled so that it's always you and me partnering up, like one of those pop buddy cop movies, on these podcasts? I thought maybe it was just random, but now I'm starting to think it's strategic. Is that true?
Well, what I was told is it's a perk of your job to do the podcast with me in all these iterations. So that's actually a benefit, right? I'm sure you feel the exact same way.
I was told I was being punished. Wow, we're going to have to take this to HR later. So for those of you who have tuned in on some of the other podcasts that Corey and I have done together, you might understand or recall that we tend to address a little bit less of the orthodox healthcare topics and instead delve into some of the more unique and unusual subject matter. So if you're tuning in because you want to talk about exclusions and medical necessity, maybe you should skip this one and move to the next. But if you're interested in some of the deep, dark corners of the healthcare industry, you're in the right place. And in fact, it's so funny. A month ago, prior to recording, Corey very enthusiastically sent me an email, and he basically said, "Hey, Ron, I've got a great idea for our next podcast." This guy obviously needs more to do, because if he's thinking a month in advance about the podcast, we have to address that ASAP. But he says, "Ron, I got this great idea for the next podcast. Let's talk about nasty, sinful, habits and addictions and all the dirty underbelly of society and how it ties into healthcare." And I said, "Man, there's nothing better than it." And the truth is, we talked about, I can't even remember at this point, Corey, in one of the previous podcasts, I remember we talked about Doritos and Mountain Dew and, about how all of these, I think it was at the time we were talking about the new, health administration, leadership and the different agencies, FDA, et cetera, as far as what dyes and ingredients were going to be banned. And, and so we sort of scraped a little bit of that tip of the iceberg when it came to the interplay between the things that are bad for us and how it impacts healthcare. And we're kind of going to continue that conversation today. And it's interesting, Corey, because they always say, if you want to know where it's at, follow the money, right? Follow the money. And all you have to do is look at where private equity is investing its money. And I remember, gosh, I must have been, 18. I think I was only first able to start investing money. And I remember I was fascinated by this fund called a sin fund. Okay. And basically all they did was they looked at the things that people shouldn't do but can't get enough and invest in those things. So whether it was alcohol, tobacco, gambling, adult entertainment, because the feeling was this was something that people were always going to purchase. The money was always going to be there, and it was a safe investment. And it's kind of funny to think, but in truth, especially post-pandemic, substance abuse, alcoholism, porn addiction, these things were all increasing when people were locked in their homes, quarantined, along with all the mental health issues that we know kind of revealed themselves during the pandemic. And we've talked a little bit about how those things affect our plans and the expenses we could expect to pay. But Corey, it didn't end with the pandemic. And in fact, as an example, even here in Massachusetts, legalized sports gambling, sports betting. A lot of equity investors investing in these apps and things on their phones so that you could just download it and gamble on sports events right there on your phone. I mean, Corey, you're obviously dressed for the event. I see your shirt, right? Additionally, I just recently was hearing about an app or an online service where you could purchase lottery tickets on the phone. They'll buy it for you. It's a courier service, basically, and then they deliver it to your home. So we're making it easier and easier to engage in, quote unquote, these sinful behaviors, right? And so where there's an investment there, right, cause and effect, we can expect that if these things become easier and more widespread, there will be health, both mental and physical health repercussions that will trickle down to our plans as well. So I'm going to go ahead and shut up at this point because I've sort of set the scene. And Corey, if you want to jump in about what we're already seeing and what we're predicting to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage everyone to go back and listen to our prediction episode before I get into this about what we thought was going to happen with RFK taking the lead of HHS there, because I think we were shockingly right on a lot of things, specifically the SNAP benefits cutting out junk food. So, we are a little prophetic here at the FIA podcast, empowering profits and empowering plans. But yeah, so Ron, it's no surprise here. If anyone's followed the Empowering Plans podcast, they know that I like to dabble in sports gambling, right? There's a very famous incident that happened last year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Adam will tell you about it. But I dabble in online gambling and sports betting, and I think it's a great little pastime. It's a great way to make the game a little bit more entertaining. But you just know that there's been a shift in the cultural zeitgeist, because phrases that I would use to a bookie at the corner of a Walgreens at like midnight, terms like parlay or a teaser or buying points, those are now just in the lexicon of everyday Americans, right? You go to a bar, you order a beer, everyone's talking about what they got. They got action on this, and I got a two touchdowns for this guy, or I got a same game parlay. This is now just normal language, and it is because we've been inundated with this sports betting and sports gambling culture that we're in now. ESPN has all these real-time sports betting graphics when they're covering games. You get commercials for them, very outlandish, lavish commercials with Jamie Foxx being a spokesperson for one app. Every sports podcast is sponsored by either DraftKings or FanDuel. So there's just a lot of money in sports gambling. And again, it's something I participate in, something I don't think is inherently wrong, but it's something to be informed about, and we'll wrap it all together why. But there was a 15% increase in revenue from 2023 to 2024 in sports betting, and it eclipsed a $15 billion a year industry. And that includes sports betting and fantasy football, as long as there's money tied to it. And what you have seen in a trend line is exactly what you pointed out, Ron, is that you saw a lot of private equity and venture capital investing in apps like Sleeper, which is a very popular fantasy football app. It's the app that my friends and I use for our fantasy league. And they got in on that for like $3 or $4 million, and then they flipped it for $80 million in just a couple of years. But now we're seeing that venture capital and private equity are investing in gambling addiction treatment centers, specifically telemedicine options for gambling addiction. So the same venture capital firm that invested in Flip Sleeper also just bought up a conglomerate of telehealth gambling addictions. So what is that telling you? That is telling you that there's a market demand now. There was market demand for sports betting when the Supreme Court said, we're going to let the states decide this. And now you see that there's going to be a market demand for the treatment of gambling addiction. And, there's some anecdotal evidence outside. There was a great article that actually came out just a while ago, and we'll actually put the link in the description of this. I'll send it to Matt when we upload the podcast, that talks about how there's been like a 18 to 23% rise in gambling addiction claims over the last year, and gambling addiction therapies being sought out. which is something that I think our plans need to be concerned about. And it's not just gambling, Ron. It's also, and if everyone just closes your eyes and think about a random strip mall in a suburb real quick. And what used to be in random strip malls in the suburbs were liquor stores, right? You could go and you see a strip mall and you could go and you have a 24-hour liquor store and you can stop and get a nice little bottle of wine on the way home. But now think about what you're seeing next door to these liquor stores, right? Especially in states, in certain states, you're seeing dispensaries pop up in these strip malls for marijuana or cannabis products. In Kentucky, cannabis is not legal. Only the medical version of THC is legal. But we have Delta 8 and Delta 9 shops everywhere you look. You can get vapes, you can get edibles. They're now getting even into legalized mushrooms and legalized pain pills, which is something that the Trump administration is looking into because there's some crazy health effects for this. But you're seeing this shift in more access to THC related products. And lo and behold, Ron, guess what is getting its own ICD-10 code now is cannabis use disorder, because cannabis use disorder is now on a rise, something like up 30% year over year. And now this is a broad definition, and it ranges from maybe you're too dependent on it all the way to you're having actually medical symptoms of nausea, vomiting, severe paranoia. There's a lot of studies coming out right now that are leading to exacerbated mental health conditions. The thing that we always heard, and that's always been a talking point, and so one of the reasons that I supported legalization of marijuana is the relaxing effect. It could be better than SSRIs for anxiety, for cancer patients to treat nausea. But you're seeing that the potency of the legalized marijuana is so strong now, it's actually inducing psychosis in some types of states, or in some cases. And so you're seeing a rise in claims as it relates to cannabis use as well. And it's also very mainstream. It's not. I went downtown to a Louisville Bats baseball game the other day, and in Kentucky, Ruby Red, Kentucky, not legal here. Just people vaping and smoking marijuana kind of openly, and really no one doing anything about it, because it's hard to differentiate between whether or not this is legal or the illegal substance. So you're seeing rise in those types of claims. And then the last one I want to talk about, and then we'll tie it all together why we think it's important for plan sponsors and our audience to know about this, is adult entertainment industry, Ron. There has been no bigger of a push into the mainstream, in my opinion, than sites like OnlyFans or Fansly's, which are subscription model services to directly to subscribe to pornographic content. I'm not here to cast judgment on it. There's obviously a market demand for it, and here it is, and you can have it. But it's crossing over into the mainstream like never before. L'Oreal just hired a top OnlyFans model to promote their makeup. And this makeup, and we could have a long conversation over a drink about this some point, this makeup is targeted to a teenage demographic. And they're hiring an OnlyFans content creator to be the spokesperson for the L'Oreal makeup brand. So again, it's something that was in the shadows and on the outside being thrust into mainstream. And what are we seeing now? We have a brand new diagnosis code for porn-induced erectile dysfunction now, because the use of pornography is so prevalent that there's erectile dysfunction that is directly linked to porn consumption. I was reading some stats this morning. The average American is exposed to pornography at the age of 13 now. 59% of teenage boys are exposed to pornography, and 38% of teenage girls are exposed to pornography before they're 16. It's the ease of access to this type of content, coupled with the fact that it's being more, I use the word a lot, but it's just mainstream now to talk about these types of things, and it's leading to a lot of medical conditions. Ron, do you have any kind of observations or anything you want to add on to that before we get kind of into the meat of how we're going to tie all this together?
Yeah, and I do. And I think one of the things that's very interesting, and Corey, as you're discussing it, is the fact that, when we talk about mental health parity and we talk about mental health benefits and the fact that if you're providing them, the coverage needs to be equivalent to or equal to the coverage you're providing for other medical care, we'll say physical medical care. And what's interesting is in these particular topics and areas that you're discussing today, very few areas in healthcare and frankly in society can you see things sort of ebbing and flowing between the two sides of healthcare as fluidly as you do here. Because when you're talking about things that are addictive, right, whether we're talking about substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, adult content, these things have elements of both mental health care and physical health care intertwined, right? It could be that you're engaging in this behavior, gambling addiction, whatever it is, in response to a mental health crisis, some sort of mental health condition, or it could be that it creates or develops a mental health condition, one side or the other. It could be that someone is predisposed to a certain mental health condition and this triggers it. At the same time, the mental health condition, the addiction, the excessive consumption, in turn, then manifests itself into a physical health condition. So this is very fascinating just from a parity standpoint, a mental health parity standpoint, where in order to respond to and treat some of the types of conditions you're discussing today, which again, as things become mainstream, you're naturally going to see more of it. You need to address both the mental health care and physical health care aspects of it. So I think in very few areas will you see quite as much parity and need for parity as you do here. Certainly we've talked about in the past about substance abuse and rehab facilities, but this takes it from just, the occasional person with mental health conditions that are engaging in illegal drug use and explodes the numbers, if for no other reason than because it's legal and mainstream. So, I think that with that in mind, Corey, let's then jump in as a plan administrator, plan sponsor. What should I be keeping in mind from a healthcare professional?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you should plan for is to start seeing these types of claims. You're going to start seeing these types of claims come in more and more, regardless of what the vice industry is going to be. And you're going to need to start thinking about how am I going to, help these employees that might be struggling with this, and then two, how do I make sure that I'm a prudent plan administrator and spending funds, and am I going to be covering these types of conditions? Because I met with one of the consulting attorneys when I was first doing research for this, that does a lot of our NQTL analysis and works with the mental health parity, and basically his short answer to this question was that if you are going to offer any type of mental health counseling or inpatient care, then you're not really going to be able to carve out the specific types for gambling addiction, or for cannabis use, or for adult entertainment, sex addiction, or PIED. You're not going to be able to carve those out individually. So you're left with, if you're including it and covering it for some, it's going to be an umbrella coverage for all these conditions. And these conditions are on the rise. So I would encourage all plan sponsors to take this seriously, to do your research, to keep an eye on where the money is going, private equity, venture capital. What is your employee base working like? These are obviously, it is what it is. These types of vices affect males between the ages of 22 and 34 more than anyone else. If that's your workforce, get ready to start seeing some gambling addiction or other types of addictive claims coming in on your plan. That's what I would encourage our listeners to do.
I think also, Corey, anytime we talk about any kind of commercial, equity-driven, investment-driven expansion in healthcare, there are some very smart people who understand their rights and know how to leverage laws to their benefit. And so one of the things that I think also as a plan administrator, what should we, be expecting or anticipating, is that if we don't have our ducks in a row preemptively, if claims come in and they're mishandled and not in accordance with applicable law, you will be taken to task, because these individuals, they're not coming from a place of ignorance. This is professionally driven. They know their rights. They understand mental health parity. So if claims are coming in from a treatment, a facility that's treating addiction to one of these new sort of expanding sin, whether it's drugs, alcohol, adult entertainment, etc. And it's something where it's new to you, right? But it's still a mental health condition. And those claims come in and you don't know how to process them, or you don't process them in accordance with the terms of the plan, or in parity with your other physical medical health coverage. They're going to file those appeals. They're going to know their rights. So we need to be prepared and ensure that we're getting our NQTL testing, that we're ensuring that we have mental health parity in our plans, that we understand how the exclusions apply. We understand how the definition of medical necessity applies, right? It could be something that in the past wasn't considered a true health condition, and therefore treatment of that condition wouldn't be deemed to be medically necessary. That definition may have changed. Corey brought up all these new ICD-10 diagnosis codes that are arising as these new diagnoses are being identified and formalized. So something that wasn't medically necessary before becomes medically necessary now. You need to stay ahead of it. You need to make sure your plans are compliant with current regulatory and statutory law. You need to make sure that you're in compliance with mental health parity. You need to ensure that you've received your NQTL testing, and you need to make sure that you have an up-to-date understanding and definition of things like medical necessity. And only by doing that will you stay ahead of those who hope that you will make a mistake and get their lump of flesh from you on top of having their claims paid. So stay ahead of the game, get those documents reviewed, get your processes in line, and you will be all right. Corey, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, you just missed the opportunity to say be proactive, since you like the P sound so much at the beginning of the podcast. You danced all the way around it.
Well, you know what? I was looking for prudent, but you already got that one. So I think we've covered all the P's today. The only other P I could say is Pat the Man Santos, our podcast producer. Thank you so much, as always, buddy. The unsung hero behind the scenes making these things happen. And another unsung hero that I can't see, but you see me, is our audience. And I just have to thank you again. We've been doing these podcasts, webinars, blogs, articles, live presentations. I realize, and Corey, I don't mind telling you, today, September 5th, is the date we are recording this podcast, is my 19th FIA anniversary. I've been with the company now 19 years today. And I got to tell you, for the majority of those years, we have been, on top of just doing our day-to-day, nose to the grindstone work, producing just fun media content. And the only reason why, for more than a decade and a half, I have had the privilege of producing this type of media content, sharing our thoughts, just kind of getting down and dirty and talking about what really drives this industry, is because of you, the listeners, that you actually care to listen in, tune in, subscribe, download, and listen to these podcasts, etc. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening in. Hopefully you found this almost as entertaining as some of the other content we discussed today. And on behalf of myself, Corey, Pat, the FIA Group, and the entirety of the FIA Group, thank you so much for tuning in to another Empowering Plans podcast with the FIA Group. Be well.